Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, May 22nd at 7 p.m. We have a special session of council tonight where we'll be reading some ordinances, and then we will adjourn from that special session and move on to committee meetings. Our first item of business is to establish a quorum, and all council members are present.
Except one.
Oh, except Michelle Pappy, excuse me. How could I miss her? So we'll look forward to her return next week. We now have ordinances for third reading. The first one being Ordinance 5717. This is an ordinance authorizing water line replacement on Avon and a portion of Dalton Avenue, which is project number 310, and is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Nisley. I would like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 57-17.
Second.
Thank you. If you recall, this ordinance is an attempt to improve our aging infrastructure. This authorizes the City Service Safety Director to expend up to $467,000 from the Water Fund to address this need. And again, as noted, this would replace water lines on Avon and a portion of Dalton. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of this ordinance. Do we have any other comments or questions from council members or administration?
Just
Yes.
a quick one.
Councilmember Butler.
With this sort of update, it also helps the rest of the neighborhood for fire protection. That's something that Andy Stone pointed out on our infrastructure tour. Thank you.
Good comment. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 5917 is an ordinance authorizing 2017 street paving and repairs. This is project number 312 and will be introduced tonight by Councilmember Cochran. Thank you.
Thank you, President Nisley. This ordinance is to do our annual street paving, which is a really important part of what the city does every summer. And of note is the fact that we will be doing more street paving this summer because we were able to allocate more funds to this project because of our recent levy that we passed. So we appreciate folks supporting that levy. That means that we get to contribute more to the city's infrastructure. So I move to adopt
Second.
Ordinance 05917.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any other comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 6017 is an ordinance declaring certain items no longer needed for a municipal purpose, and this is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Nisley. We discussed this in committee, and then obviously we're on third reading. There's a number of items here that are no longer needed. We have a scale, a couple of wastewater pump motors, 2 raw wastewater pump bases, 2 raw wastewater pump volutes and impellers, and a few other smaller motors as well, 15 horsepower. And again, this authorizes the City Service Safety Director to dispose of these items and to other government agencies, nonprofits, 501c3s, et cetera. Thank you.
Okay. And so yeah, we have a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, and Councilmember Reisner, yes.
I just have one question. Do we have any idea of what the value of some of this equipment may be?
You know, Director Stone went out and went to eBay or went wherever to see what the value was, and the value was low. It was a little over $1,000 for the weir pumps and the scale. He never could really find a comparable price, but for the motors and the pumps, he did his due diligence, and it ranged, as I remember correctly, between $1,020 to $1,500 for some of these items. But again, it's above 1,000, so this is the right way to dispose. And this is also, as you know, residue that was replaced with the current wastewater treatment plant. So as new equipment was purchased, this was essentially kind of retired from duty. Some of it was old.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Any
Mayor.
other comments or questions? All right, we have the motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries, and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 6117 is an ordinance amending the 2017 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. As discussed in committee, this is basically moving some funds around. $7,005 will go to the Community Center Fund for ComCorp Hopewell Health Wellness Program. $6,100 to Capital Improvements Fund, Police Department, and $25,000 to Internal Service Funds to cover claims for service, garage fire, and increasing the total appropriations by said amount.
Okay,
So I make a motion that we adopt 6117.
okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 6217 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 517, the 2017 staffing levels in the mayor's office, and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt 6217.
Second.
This is a small amendment to the ordinance of 517. As you can see on your copy, on your hard drive, where it says General Mayor Administrative Coordinator, we're striking out will increase to 1 through 8/31/17. That's being changed to 1. So that's the amendment.
So we have a motion and second for approval of 6217. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 6317 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 15116, the 2017 staffing levels, part-time and seasonal employees, and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. This is one of those ordinances that we have to do this time every year. Oh, we have a, yes.
A process question first. Is the number of council members here tonight that have an ability to suspend or amend the existing ordinance? Yes.
We do.
We do have another item for staffing under the committee this evening, but in order to proceed, as the auditor has been requesting, so that the cemetery has full workers and reaching, of course, Memorial Day weekend, we're seeking an amendment to this. Can you speak to it?
Wasn't quite prepared, but yes, we're new to being in the cemetery business, and there are different laws about that and what kind of funds you can use and who can work where, and naturally it makes sense for George, our lands and buildings director, to supervise the maintenance for the cemetery, but he also does it for all over the city. So it's better for him to be able to share people, but we need to be able to pay them appropriately. We have splits with other funds. This is all within the general fund. However, the staffing ordinance needs to match that. As you recall, we have someone, say Andy, as EPW. He's paid partly out of water, partly out of sewer, partly out of streets. So this is nothing unusual. We have several other people in the city that are paid from different areas. However, the staffing has to match up how we need to pay them. And we need, I believe, a full-time person in cemetery and part-time in lands and buildings, so that George isn't using his lands and buildings person at the cemetery and vice versa. So I don't know if you still have your information on that and what we need?
Well, actually, I don't have any information at all.
Well, I sent information out, but I don't know who all I sent it to, but,
Well, this is the last email that I received. It had to do with 6817 and 6917. I have nothing about 6317.
yeah, no, this came up, I don't know, in committee. I wasn't here, and the last we heard, I think the administration wanted to talk about it, so maybe they should address it starting now.
Okay, go ahead.
That's true, but staff this morning, George and Bolson, our Deputy Director of Lands and Buildings, was stating that he needed to have all hands on deck and ready to have the cemetery spruced up. The auditor's office, as you stated, that it has to be, they're all general funds, so that was my one question, is why is cemetery deemed a proprietary endeavor?
No, because it's out of the general fund at this point.
Basically, I think you viewed it as a simple clerical change in the staffing.
It really is. We have seasonal in lands and buildings and a part-time in the cemetery, and we just need like one of each or half of each in both of them. Because there's a difference between seasonal and part-time.
Okay.
The part-time person works year-round, but not full-time. Seasonal people are only allowed 120 days out of the year and all that. So for them to double up in the summer when most of the outside maintenance is, they just need to change that. So I don't know. We need a part-time position in lands and building and a cemetery seasonal, and a cemetery seasonal.
And cemetery seasonal is full-time, correct?
No, that's just seasonal is.
Is part-time,
Yeah,
okay.
see, we have a part-time person in the cemetery who works year-round, but only part-time. But in, this time of year, there's a lot more to do, and so he needs to be able to share both of these people so they can work together, whether they're working on city buildings or in the cemetery.
Okay.
So we're talking about low hourly wages and, seasonal person and part-time, not full-time, no benefits. It's just a matter of getting the
attachment?
number of positions in the staffing ordinance.
Okay, so this is all general fund, and it is an adjustment so that our staffing levels description reflects accurately what's happening or needs to happen in the different departments this summer.
Yes.
In order to,
I brought it up.
okay,
I'm afraid I'm picky about that, but when I see someone who we're paying out of our cemetery budget working somewhere else, it's not that it's a bad thing to do, but, it has to be written in our rules.
right.
Where
So
I'm
it keeps
coming
the
from.
record straight, so when the auditors come and review all our books, we're in order.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if I'm understanding right, now we've had a motion and second so far. So what we would need to do is withdraw that motion and second. Oh, I had that hand. Had you? Had you already moved?
Yes, I had.
Yep, I had it, I had. So if there's a friendly agreement to withdraw those, the motion and second, then we can amend and suspend.
I'll withdraw.
And who seconded?
I
Chris?
withdraw.
And you'll withdraw that, okay. So now, Jeff, what we'd need is a motion to amend 6317.
I make a motion to amend 6317.
Second.
Okay, and that would be as described by the auditor and the service safety director to accurately reflect our seasonal needs in the cemetery and also accurately reflect the staffing in the building, lands and building department.
We feel we came to this place due to the restriction we used to have as needed, and then it was requested that we identify numbers, to fill those slots. So that's kind of the back history of how we got to this. Right now, it's showing one seasonal worker, one seasonal landscaper, but 3 cemetery maintenance. So you're saying it's the cemetery maintenance person working in the lands and buildings.
Well, he doesn't have 3 cemetery maintenance people. That's the other thing. These positions aren't necessarily all going to be filled. But he has a seasonal person that he needs for the cemetery. So we need to add a seasonal line in our staffing ordinance for the cemetery. And then we need a part-time person in the lands and buildings.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to reflect that, to amend this ordinance to reflect that for the staffing levels. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, this ordinance has been amended, Councilmember Reisner,
And read for the first time.
and read for the first time,
But we're
and
going
now,
to suspend the rules
Right.
because we're under a serious Memorial Day deadline. So I make a motion that we suspend the rules
Second.
okay,
for the reasons stated.
we have a motion and second for suspending the rules on ordinance 6317. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? The rules have been suspended, Councilmember Reisner.
I move that we adopt 6317.
Second.
Okay.
I'm not saying anymore.
Okay. So we have the motion and second now for approval of 6317. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? The ordinance has been approved. Okay. We'll move on to ordinances for second reading, and there will be one other of these in the second reading that will also be suspended, just to forewarn you. And amend too, one more. But ordinance 6417 is an ordinance authorizing the Southeast Ohio Public Energy Council, known as SOPAC, and as agent for the city, to enter into a natural gas program agreement with the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, which is known as NOPEC, and this is introduced by all members of council. Ordinance 6517 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to submit an application and enter into a water supply revolving loan account agreement and designating dedicated repayment source for the loan. This is introduced by Councilmember Butler. Ordinance 6617 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to acquire right-of-way, to advertise and accept bids where necessary, and enter into contracts for construction, engineering services, and right-of-way acquisition services for the West Union Street Sidewalk Extension Project. That's project number 309, introduced by Councilmember Pappy. Ordinance 6717 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids where necessary and enter into contracts for construction and engineering services for the East State Street US 33 project, number 288, and authorizing the auditor to make an interfund transfer. This is introduced by Councilmember Pappy. Ordinance 6817 is an ordinance amending the 2017 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. This ordinance is amending the 2017 appropriation ordinance, but it needs to be amended first. So, according to would the auditor care to speak to? I have your email on this one. So.
And this is adding a Bureau of Workers' Comp check, is that
Yes.
correct, for $4,494.17?
Yes. As you know, we get these checks and then we try to set them aside and encumber them so that they can't be spent for anything else. And then when it comes time to pay our bill, then it really helps all the departments that we, take the percentage of workers' comp out of. So what happened was just like the last meeting a week ago, we received a check that day for $4,494. And so we just wanted to add that on. The $95,000 was already in an ordinance, and we just wanted to go ahead and appropriate them at the same time so that we can encumber them, and then they will be spoken for.
Thank you. So that $95,000 and then the $4,494 totals $100,005.67.
That's what I
Correct?
got.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion
Yes.
and a second to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, that passes. The rules, or the ordinance has been amended. Councilman
I would
Reisner.
like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 6817.
Second.
And
The reason being that we're needing to pay these
yes,
items out. Okay.
which is a pretty good reason.
For that. Okay. We have a motion and second for suspending the rules for ordinance 6817. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
Therefore, make a motion to adopt 6817.
Second.
For all the reasons hereto stated.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approving ordinance 6817. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ordinance has been approved. Ordinance 6917 is an ordinance authorizing the payment of a prior year expense and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you. I believe this also needs an amendment, though I do not believe it needs to be suspended. Is that correct? Okay. So the reason for the amendment is a 2016 amount of $6,258.17. That was for the court, I believe? Yes. Okay. You need to speak to it or anything, auditor?
These are bank charges. The bank has changed the way we get charged for things. We actually don't get charged for a lot of things, but now we are. And so these are bank charges on the municipal court bank accounts. And originally the amount was a little bit higher. It included some charges from 2015. However, there's already money in place encumbered on a PO to pay those. So really, all we need is approval to pay 2016 fees, which is the $6,258,000 amount.
Okay. So even though that tonight, if we amend, this will go back to a first reading, so we'll have to start, second reading next time. There's no time problem.
Well, I mean, they're already late, but so I don't think it's an issue.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it's an issue.
Just want to make sure.
Sure.
So, now, did we do the motion and second for amending? Do we have a motion?
We don't have a second.
Second.
Okay, now we do. All right, we have a motion and second for amending 6917 to reflect those 2016 costs of that $6,258.17. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ordinance has been amended and read for the first time then. Ordinance 7017 is an ordinance authorizing the lease of property not currently needed for a municipal purpose, and this is introduced by Councilmember Fall. And I believe that those are the last of the ordinances for tonight, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We will now move on to committee meetings. And the first one is the City and Safety Services Committee with Councilmember Butler chairing.
Thank you, President Isley. This evening, we're fortunate enough to have a guest in our presence here who has driven in from out of town to give us an update on the progress of our municipal pool. Mr. Keith Hall is here from MSA. Prior to maybe him jumping into the presentation, I can also see if the administration wants to offer anything as well as part of the introduction. Thank you.
Well, we welcome Keith here this evening, and he will be going through the slides to update you in terms of his latest and close to final construction estimate. And then we will ask that you look closely at the schedule in terms of proceeding through the ordinances to be able to get this out to bid and awarded this summer so that when the last day of the pool comes, we can decommission it.
And speaking of which, I mean, what the Service Safety Director just mentioned, something that we've been talking about within the staff, especially this morning, is the thought of having a decommissioning event for our 43-year-old swimming pool as we transition from the old to the new. But again, what you've got before you is kind of the culmination of everything that's has gone into this project to this point in time. Obviously, probably still some tweaking to be done as we move forward, but look forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. And as a friendly reminder to council members, you do have on your drive, on the Google Drive, you do have a digital version of the presentation. Thank you. Mr. Hall, it's all yours.
All right, thank you.
It's been a while since I've been here. There's been a great deal of progress, primarily on design more than anything. You're going to see some images of what the buildings look like. The pool amenities and all that have pretty much been finalized. Currently, we're running through mostly technical components at this time and getting ready to go to bid, as was laid out. So I always start off with this slide just to kind of remind everybody where the pool is going. Essentially, it's going to go right where the existing pool is. We're going to wipe out the existing parking lot. We're going to wipe out the existing pool, regrade the site, pull the site up a little bit out of the floodplain, mostly around the edges, and go back in with a new pool. This is just our process. I've had this slide in here from day one. We started out with some community engagement last summer, pretty intense, and then went into schematic design. Went through some design development, and now we're into construction documents. And I'm doing a little bit of catch-up tonight with you on some of the activities we did through the design development process. What we're looking forward to is construction administration, and that means we're targeting going out to bid around mid-June. So we'll advertise. We'll put it on the street for about 3 to 4 weeks, roughly. Hopefully our bids come in good. We are currently talking and getting the word out to some general contractors so we get some good competitiveness on the bidding and keep our fingers crossed that that it bids well. It is anticipated, as pointed out, that the existing pool, the day it shuts down, the next day they'll be on site, and you'll see a fence go up around it in a day, and chances are within 2 or 3 days they'll have equipment on site to start doing demolition work and start getting into the ground a little bit and moving. So if you're going to have a decommissioning event, you better get there quick. Otherwise, the general contractor is going to do that for you. To run through some of the amenities, this has always been there, and since the last time we've been talking, we'll have a main activity pool. It's 0 entry, the spray ground, the top pool, and I'm going to show a plan with all this on there in a minute. The lap pool with a connected deep well diving pool, 2 run-out slides, some pool amenities which include climbing walls, slides, geysers, and some shade structures, typical stuff. The pool house, which tonight you're going to get your first view in terms of what it looks like architecturally. The pool equipment building, it sort of runs parallel to the pool house, and then the pool itself. We have administration, and between us, we've made a conscious decision to move forward with the saltwater chlorination, or the salt chlorination system for the pool. So it's commonly called a saltwater pool, is going to be what's bid, so we're going to move forward with that. The cost estimate, this is the same estimate that I was presenting back a few months ago. We don't feel like it's changed a whole lot. I am just now getting into updating this based on where we are at in construction documents, and we're at about 80%. So I have a lot more information, and I'm going to sort of get my consultants involved and tighten this up a little bit. But we feel as if we're on target with the budget and everything. We are pushing the limits since we did go to the saltwater chlorination type system. We are sort of pushing on some budgets. So what we're going to do to protect ourselves through bidding a little bit is we're going to put in some alternates into the bid. Some things you want, but at least it allows us to put the project together if we start to kind of crouch over that, go over the estimated cost.
Excuse me, just a quick question. The last bid was 6.2, or the last estimate. I realize you're refining that some, so it's up a couple $100,000, and I'm just checking to see where it went up primarily, or is it just
mostly
different
some
categories?
site cost and some different things we're doing and everything, and that's pretty typical. It'll creep up, and then it'll sometimes start to creep down a little bit. So
thank you.
I still think at the end of the day we're within the money that's been allocated for the project.
Okay,
So
thanks.
this is an overall site plan. I'm going to immediately just go to the next slide because it zooms in on it a little bit better. But you can start to see this is not too much different than what's been presented in the past. If you come in at the front, there's the pool house building on one side. We're going to have the and that's this side right here. I would call that more the administrative side, and I'll show some blown up plans of what's actually in that side. And then on the other side is more the restrooms and user amenities. You got the splash pad, the top pool, the zero entry, the slides, and then the lap pool with the dive well, as well as the pool mechanical building that will be accessed off the side driveway that's there. The splash pad, you've heard me, a number of times, and you've got it on your wall out here, talk about the essence of Athens and that exercise that you've gone through. And we've spent a great deal of time internally evaluating that and trying to figure out how we can use that process that you went through to influence the design of the project, so that the design of the project reflects what the community is all about, or its essence. So one of the things that came out in that Essence program was your art, your folk art, and all that stuff. And so we're looking at the splash pad as an opportunity maybe to do a little bit of an art amenity on the splash pad surface itself. So that's primarily going to be some epoxy coverings on the ground. It won't be stained concrete, because stained concrete will fade over time, so it'll be long lasting. And again, this is one of those things that sort of adds to the cost, and with every time we add something like this, we're pushing the limits of it. So we're going to bid the project that'll allow us to make decisions as we bid the project. But we think this is a pretty cool idea, and helps give that area some visual interest, as well as it ties it to the community. As I noted, the buildings, I think the building, the main pool house building, this has come along really, really well. I think you're going to have one of the best pool houses that we've been lucky enough to design in a while, as we think we've resolved some pretty cool things. The big green area over here to the right is a community room. And if you remember, I showed you the splash pad. Well, that community room is right adjacent to the splash pad, and it has its own restroom up here in the corner. And what we're proposing is 2 garage doors, one right there if you look at my pointer, and then another one right there. And so that essentially takes that community room and makes it a covered outdoor shelter. You can close the one door off to the pool and still host birthday parties in September when you're getting that 3rd season out of the splash pad itself. So we think that's going to offer you lots of versatility, as well as maybe a little bit of ROI on the rentals, down the road as you go to the community with it. The check-in and office areas are, they're right there at the front door. We've taken care of a lot of control features with that I think administration has likes where we're at with it. And then on the pool side, we have 2 pretty decently sized restrooms. We have these 2 areas right here. Those are showers, and then the areas below it are just changing rooms without showers. So you can go in there and you can just go into a stall. It's almost like a fitting room in a store, and change without having to work around toilets and kids trying to touch toilets and do all that stuff. So then the lockers that face the pool area, and the mechanical room and stuff like that, support space. And then down further on the site towards the river is where we've located the concessions, in a separate building. The concessions are, they're not really cooking food in there. Most of that's pre-wrapped or pre-cooked, or it's pizza being brought in and served and that sort of thing. So I don't think we don't have a cooking hood. What I'm trying to say is we don't have a hood in there or anything like that for folks to be doing cooking and everything. It's got a little bit of storage with it. We thought there was a need to, and there is a need, to put maybe a couple restrooms down at that end of the pool, so that if you're down at the lap pool, you're not having to go all the way up to the pool building. You can come to this building and have access to a couple restrooms. The guards will have a room in here also that they will go to for their breaks and sort of as their base camp. And then everything in purple, with the exception of this one room here that's got labeled as storage. That room is primarily pool storage, and that's primarily for the ropes and stuff coming off the lap lanes and whatever other things come off the water and need to be stored within a locked area. Everything else around that is all for the chlorination system. And as I said, we are going to the salt generated chlorination system. Oops, sorry.
Keith, am I correct in remembering that the initial upfront cost for salt is more expensive, but the long-term benefits.
You'll see your payback.
Yeah.
But it's 5-6 years down the road.
Correct.
So, I mean, it is, but you still have that upfront cost, and given you're a public entity, you're sort of locked into that, and, until you maybe allocate more funds or so, but I think we're okay.
Yeah.
And we're gonna build the drawings such that, we can protect ourselves a little bit. Basically, we're gonna do some add alternates to the project. So you may choose, and I know this could be kind of painful, but the splash pad, for example, that is something that could be built 2 years down the road that allows you to do the saltwater chlorination generation system right now. So we'll build, them into the bid as add alternates so when it goes to bid, it'll come in under bid, and we can add these things into it if the money allocated will allow it to do it. And that protects everybody. We would do that anyway. So. And then this is the building. We went through some variations in style with the building, with administration and with the recreation folks, and presented a number of options, and this is what we landed on. The main feature of this is two very simple buildings with two sloping roofs, sloping in a couple different directions, with this feature going down the middle and providing a covered entry that secondary function as a shelter during storms and things like that. If there's a major event coming through, they got to get out of there, or they got to get in the buildings. This is if it starts raining and it looks like it's blowing over, this is a place to go stand for 15 minutes or so while the storm goes through and they open the pool back up. This structure, and I'm going to show you some more renderings, but it sort of twists through, and the whole idea with that is that it's taking on the language of the river. So that gets back to the essence. It's the whole design is, as we go through it, is always influenced by what a river does and the flow of the river and so forth. And then again, just another view. This area down here in the corner is the community room we talked about. So as you can see, we're taking advantage of the high ceiling space, bringing a lot of natural light into it. And you can start to see that middle canopies twisting out of there. And then this is as if you're standing underneath of that canopy. And then some of the materials you're seeing is, we've always felt like, brick is it needs to be a brick building. Athens is about its brick. But we don't feel like it needs to be a red brick necessarily. And you can kind of see some of the variations in the brick that we're looking down at below here. And then going up a certain height with it, and then the area between the roof and the top of the brick being a wood finish, like a vertical wood siding up there. And again, we got, I am showing some of this, a couple different variations in it. We tend to like going more towards a gray tone, or even getting into something that's more of a blend between a gray and a red versus, going all the way red. But we're trying to, and administration hasn't seen this, and actually you guys are probably the first, so we're trying to get some input on some of that, is what I'm trying to say. And get a feel for where everybody would be. And then another one of the essence pieces is, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, there's some metalwork that keeps showing up in a lot of the essence images. And we have some gates that we needed to design across the front of that breezeway to secure the site. So we want to spend a little bit of money there and do some very decorative, ornate gates that reflect some of this, and so you can kind of see how we did that. We're essentially going to take that and copy it, but it needs to be a little more full so people can't reach through and try to unlatch on the other side. So we'll have some wire mesh behind it, or if you want to kind of think of it as, a nicer chain link behind it with this ornate metal in front of it, and we feel pretty strongly that that's going to look very, very nice. We're very, very happy with where that's landing.
And I think some of that wrought iron from Essence of Athens is from the Ridges Asylum building.
Yes.
Wrought iron work in front of the windows, so
Yes.
There's some good models up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then again, this is a straight-on two-dimensional elevation of the whole thing. This is what it will look like from the front parking lot. Unfortunately, it is the back side of the restrooms, so we don't have a lot of opportunity to put glazing down low. But we think with the materials and the sloping of the roofs and this this canopy going through the middle, it's going to create a really interesting view. And I forgot to mention that also the paving going through that breezeway, we're proposing that that all be brick also. So picking up on the Athens brick piece, and, that really relates more to the streets, and and I think people are really going to get that cue. And then on the backside facing the pool itself, that's the south view. You can see in the corner over there the community room with the garage door on it. And then we're really taking advantage of those sloping roofs and getting as much glazing in there as we can, so that when you're in those restrooms and everything, there's a lot of natural light flowing in. So, trying to take advantage of natural light while you're in there. And I don't think the colors are going to show up on this very well, but this gets back to this particular scheme starts to try to demonstrate what the, maybe the more brownish, reddish brick mix here with a wood siding above would look like. And then this is more the black, sort of gray tone. And then this gets more into maybe a warmer, redder brick. And then just some other, this is the elevations for the concessions building. We've brought this canopy down to the concessions building to provide some sort of trellis coverage out at the concession itself. If you heard me say, one thing that, whether we do this down there or not, this is definitely going to be an add alternate, because adding this canopy down there is definitely starting to push on our limitations too. But we're going to go ahead and put it in there. And as we go to bid, it'll be an item on the menu that we may be able to kind of fit into the budget or not, but that can easily be added later. We already have a little bit of a cantilever projection out there anyway to cover up that right at the concession itself. And then what this is we are really, really hoping that as the project, gets built and open and we leave town, that the community comes and takes it over. We think an awful lot of, again, I keep talking about this Essence thing, and we think an awful lot of it. And we think the more that is realized and you go to your arts community, I think we've heard that they have some level of funding and everything. There's lots of opportunity for them to come in and start looking at other areas to do things in here, whether it's hanging things, and that's what this starts to show. We've, like for example, one of the items that we identified is we have the lockers. We're gonna put lockers in. Somebody can come in and do an artistic application of those lockers, and that would be a really cool thing in that little pocket. So this is something we're gonna give the administration as it moves forward, and it can be implemented through the community. And I would look at it as a palette to really, one of the things we always said about this is like an oasis over here of downtown Athens. So the more of what you view downtown Athens is and Athens is, the more we can sort of maybe push that over there and give this a little bit of an Athens-ish feel, I think the more successful it will be. So, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Are there comments or questions from council members? Yes, Councilmember Fall.
I like to commend you on taking something that was a fairly difficult, long process and putting pictures. It always helps people to have pictures. 2 points that I would like to point out for the citizens is that season extension for the community room is a really smart idea. I think that the splash pad and the garage doors is a really great idea. And I like the season that you can do it. And who knows, we may be getting 4 seasons if it gets really climate change. And also, I think that I'm happy that people are going with the saltwater chlorination. I think that I've heard pretty regularly from people in the community that that's Athens also. It's not just physical and visual, but that's also going and doing a progressive design and engineering so that we can reduce the amount of toxic chemicals. And I'd like to see that as not an alternate add-on. I would see that people would be much more inclined to say, we may only need one slide, or we may, so that I think is something that I'm really quite pleased about. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McGee.
Thank you. I would also compliment you on your work. I do have some questions concerning the overhead feature there that's on the one photograph there. I'm not sure what you called it, but what will that be made of? And,
Yeah.
I do have a concern that when you had mentioned that perhaps the city might want to hold off on the splash pad if the costs are too expensive. I might be more inclined to hold off on some of the decorative features that might be more expensive and make sure the citizens have the splash pads. And I just want you to know, I'm sure other citizens feel that way, so.
Yeah, but just understand, when I threw that out, that's just an example. We're gonna have many more than that of different placeholders that'll allow us, again, to build the project a little bit. It's kind of a delicate balancing act, because
Sure.
if the bids come in over 10% of what's been anticipated, then we have to package it all back up again and get it back out on the street. If I can build in, add alternates, that allows a piece of it to come in under budget, and then we can pull those things in to get us the budget, that just makes it a much simpler process for everybody. And that's really the intent. And you don't want to have too many of these either, so we really gotta target those. I agree with you. I think the splash pad it's a basic requirement. It's been on the table for a while. But whether or not we do the essence stuff to it, that's really what I was talking about. That would be the alternate piece of it. So just that you understand that. Now, I don't know if we can get it back up on the screen. The materials I did pass over, but the materials on that middle canopy piece, they're like these are ribbons, they're panels. And so when you look up, you're gonna see the bottom of corrugated metal is what you're gonna see. And then they'll have a ceiling material, or a roof material, I should say, on top of them. All the roofs are gonna be a metal roof, and so we're looking at like a galvanized metal, so it's, kind of a progressive finish, contemporary finish. So you can kind of start to see, how that sort of fits in to everything else. So it's not a black roof, it's not a red roof, it's not a green roof, just, a metal, like galvanized looking metal roof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Katsas.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking back to a discussion or just a little short conversation that we had at one of the meetings, and I said, are we special? Do we have a little bit more of a public that really wants to put input in? And you said no. So this is, you can correct me, but this process kind of is the same way in other communities too, when you start to open up the idea of changing a piece of infrastructure this big. Two other points. One was I was thinking about the user group, which is children, and they like to dive, they like to swim around. A lot of them don't show up with goggles. Will the saltwater system be similar in relation to your eyes if you're swimming underwater? Because I know chlorine's going to sting.
It's easier on your eyes.
Okay, that's
If
great.
there is, and the easiest way to explain that is that there is a concept out there now called bear paddle, and it's swim lessons, and they're going in and building swimming pools within shopping centers, and those are all saltwater pools, and it's for that, and it's focused on kids, little kids, and it's for that specific reason. That's why they chose to go with that.
That's great. My third point was and this wasn't mentioned, but I do see a lot of trees on some of these plans. You're still hoping to save some of those heritage trees that are at the site, or?
Yeah, the heritage trees are all in play.
Okay.
Those are not going away. I think the last time I was here, I said, I have a landscape architect would kill us if we had to take those away. So those are, I think, from the community's perspective, they're staying, and we've adjusted that. If you look at the site plan, though, like out in the parking lot, and this is where we're going to have to sort of look at sort of the cost with this. They're showing a lot of trees on here, and we definitely want a lot of trees, but we need to manage, to our costs too. And he's kind of got a forest on there right now. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council members? Yes, Councilmember Cochran.
Thank you. I just want to comment that I appreciate these designs. I like the fact that you factored in the idea of the river and, of course, all the Essence of Athens elements and the trees, which came out loud and clear in the community discussions, that those are valuable to all of our users. The one question I have is about clarification on the deep water end of the lap pool, discussion about the variable depths. I see on the design there's sort of a line, but I'm not sure what that means across the end of the lap pool.
Yeah, the last time we talked about deep and coming up and going deep on the other end, if you remember. And that's basically what we're moving forward with. I think it's, don't hold me to this, but I think it's 4'6", then comes up to 3'6", and then back down to 4'6". But I can get that information back to them so you can, we got to have a cross section through it. And we've been off that decision for several months now, so we just took what came out in the last meeting. But it definitely, where you dive in, so it comes down, slopes down, goes up to a plateau, and then slopes down, so you can dive from both ends.
Thank you.
And that was based on input from the last meeting, if I remember correctly.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council members? The executive branch, Mayor?
Just something I just wanted to point out again to council. I'm sure you've seen this, but it's worth bringing up again since the comment about trees in the parking lot area came up. The other thing that's a feature that was built into the parking area up front was having access off of East Park Drive, but as well Community Center Drive, but they're offset from each other so that someone can't just use this as a cut through to where they're trying to go from one side to the other. It forces someone to jog around the islands that are developed, the tree islands within the parking lot itself.
Thank you.
And we are hopeful that we'll be able to bring forward the actual construction ordinance authorizing the construction and engineering and what have you by the June 5th, the next regular session. Because we'll be close on that time frame.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Any citizen input or questions? We also have our Assistant Director of Arts, Parks, and Recreation here this evening as well. Mr. Cheeky is present in the audience, who has also been watching the current pool.
Babysitting.
Yeah. Yes, one more question from council members.
Yes, Ms. Cochran had raised the issue, I think, of the depth, and I'm a little concerned. I think you said the lanes for the, for the lane part would be 4'6", is the deepest part?
At the ends, when you dive in, if I remember correctly, the conversation was about, how can we make the lap pool more usable? And so we had a discussion about, well, you need to make it at a certain depth where they dive in, but when they get to the middle, we can bring that up and go across, and then there was discussion about being able to dive from both ends.
If I could perhaps challenge that assertion, because that's not my memory. My memory is that there was concern that there would not be enough lanes, and we were told that, or I should say that too much of the pool would be utilized by the lap swimmers, and we were told that it would be able to be moved, some of the lap lanes, so that it would open up more of the pool for others, or vice versa.
That was part of the conversation
right.
too.
But I know the public has expressed some concern if that area is opened up and some of the areas are not lap lanes and just diving lanes or goofing off lanes for better use of the term. I think the public was concerned that 4'6" is not deep enough.
Yeah, I got to get back to you on the
Yeah.
on the depths that we went to, because there was specific conversation that was out of the norm on that you guys had asked for. And I think 4'6" is the standard. I'm almost certain, but I think we went a little deeper.
That's what my recollection is.
Yeah,
It
we
was
went a little
reversed,
deeper.
just like Patrick's saying. So
And then as far as the use of the lanes and everything, you have 8 lanes, and so that's an operational issue. So,
Right.
you know, maybe during high use times, there's, I don't know, 4, 6 lanes available that he has roped off. And during low use times, he pulls all the ropes aside and there's 2. You know, however that's managed operationally, I think 8 lanes is gonna give you what you need.
It's good.
That's a lot of lanes.
If I might just
Go ahead.
continue, because I am really concerned that this is not going to be deep enough for people and teenagers, since they love to hang out in the deep areas. And to me, 4, 6 is up to my chin, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'll get the cross-section through the pool to Paula,
Okay.
okay, and then she can forward it out to you guys.
I think it's crucial, though. I mean, that's...
Understood,
Okay.
absolutely understood.
Thank you.
We're here to build what you want, so.
Good.
Yes. Councilmember Reisner?
How deep is the dive well area?
Dive well is 12 feet, that I do know.
All of it? Mm-hmm. Whole area?
Yep, the whole area. The little connector slopes down to it, there's a little bit of a warp to get down there, and right at the edge of that, then it just drops all the way down.
Thank you. Mayor?
I actually have a question of Andrew Chicky. What's the current depth? What's the deepest part of our current pool? Is it 12 feet? 12 feet, okay. But that's sloped. I mean, or is that the dive well area in our current pool is all 12 feet at the deep end?
It slopes down in, so it's 9 feet around the edges and slopes down to 20.
Down
Yeah,
to 12 in the center.
This will be similar to that, I need to clarify, because somebody, did you ask me that question about the depth? It's all 12 feet in my mind, but it does slope, you know, on the sides like a typical deep well pool does.
Thank you.
But my,
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Councilmember.
My understanding is the dive well is just for diving. Kids aren't going to be hanging out in the dive well.
Well, if there's nobody diving, they'll hang out. That's what kids do.
It's usually, it's usually I don't know what you do at your pool, but what I've seen, it's usually lifeguard driven. You'll have kids jumping off the diving well, off the diving board, and they gotta dive in, then they gotta get out. Lifeguard manages that. And then sometimes they'll kill the diving boards and allow the kids to kind of jump in off the sides and swim back and forth for 10 minutes and then get back out and it becomes a diving thing again. That's typically what I've seen, anyway. I don't know what you do here, but
It's all dive all the time.
that's fine.
Oh, I've seen it both ways, yeah.
We also have
That's
climbing
nice.
Yeah,
You know, part of that diving area
is the climb.
diving, but we also split that into climbing area as well. So there's multi-use happening, and there's going to be a lot of donations.
Do you want to be on the mic, Mr. Cheeky, or no?
Not with
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Good stuff.
Yes, no.
I agree, the salt water is a better choice to fit for Athens.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you. Thank you. I believe that concludes, if there's no other questions or comments, that concludes the,
That's monumental.
yes, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Thanks for attending tonight. We'll move on to Transportation Committee, and tonight this is chaired by Councilmember Cochran.
Thank you. I understand we have information hopefully from the administration regarding the Central Athens fiber optic network.
Hopefully I didn't give away my only copy just a moment ago. I apologize to council for not getting this out to you earlier. What is working its way down the dais is just a basic draft that was brought forward to the Transportation Improvement District meeting, which is under we're one of 18 TIDs, or Transportation Improvement Districts in the state. These fall under Ohio Department of Transportation. And these are basically for, it's an economic development mechanism under ODOT. And this is for fiscal year 18 coming forward. The local Transportation Improvement District consists of City of Nelsonville representation Athens Township representation, county representation, and the city of Athens representation, as well as it's chaired by the county engineer, Jeff Maiden. There were two proposals that came forward at the last meeting, which I'm blanking on the date of that last meeting. I think it was in, thank you, the 12th. There was a bridge improvement project, as well as, which is on Baker Road, and then there was what you have before you, which is our city engineer trying to come up with something catchy. I don't know if you think it's catchy or not, but we call it CAFON, which is Central Athens Fiber Optic Network. If you flip to the next page, this was actually showed up on the street tour last Friday. You got to see the map, and now you have the narrative behind this. But again, this is a draft that came forward to the TID. This is not the whole grant package that is due at the end of the month to go before. Okay. The TID meeting was the 15th. I know the viewers don't have this map in front of them, but basically I'll kind of boil this down to the essence of what this grant is asking for. It's basically to pull fiber optics that would be city-owned fiber optics through our existing conduits in the uptown area. It would go from the Armory down Court Street, all the way down Court Street to President Street. Now there's a partnership component to this as well. On your maps that you have before you, unfortunately you didn't get color copies, but from President to basically Oxbow Bridge, what we have reached out to Ohio University to partner on is to be able to use their utility tunnel that runs under President Street and underneath Richland Avenue to Oxbow Bridge. They have agreed to allow us access to that tunnel to continue the fiber, and then the fiber would go back into our conduit all the way down to Schaefer and Richland Avenue. At that point, again, another component of this grant is to have conduit laid underground and then slung under the Richland Avenue Bridge over the Hocking River to the south side beyond the roundabout, and then it would connect once again up to conduit that was thoughtfully put in the ground on the Richland Avenue project, all the way on up to Station 2, which is at Canterbury and Richland Avenue. We're also running conduit with the West Union Street improvement down to Congress, and so that would have fiber pulled through it as well. Again, this is if successful, so I need to keep throwing that out there caveat-wise. If we're successful in getting this, is that we could run conduit through that portion of West Union. And as you can see, there's some dots along West Union, along Court Street. Those are essentially nodes, connection nodes, to where we can hook up to our traffic lights. We could also possibly, and again, I have to caveat this with possibly, have city Wi-Fi at some of these locations. As we lay this fiber into the ground, we could mount Wi-Fi stations along the way. The project, as the city engineer has spec'd at this point in time, we're looking at about a $200,000 project. The Transportation Improvement District will pay 25%, up to 25% of the project, or total dollars, they would pay up to $250,000 for a project. Well, this project's $200,000, so we're looking at, through the Transportation Improvement District, hopefully, if we're successful, that we'd be getting $50,000 from ODOT through the TID program. We think that this would be, again, would get us rolling in the right direction to where it's city-owned fiber. I can't stress that enough. It's a city-owned fiber. What we do with that fiber, once it's in the ground, would the city need to use all of it ourselves, or can we use it as an economic development tool as well, to where we have extra pairs, multiple extra pairs of fiber that we can be using to encourage economic growth or development as we're looking forward, as we move into our, who knows, stronger broadband but certainly getting into the world of fiber optics. The big thing too for transportation is that this allows us connectivity for the city buildings, but equally important, connectivity for our traffic lights up and down this corridor. We're finally getting fiber optics, making that much more efficient, as well as cameras, using the fiber that we have to put, the cameras that we do have up and down this corridor, getting them off wire and getting them onto fiber.
So the deadline for this request is the end of May, they
May
said?
31st, I believe.
And does that mean we need to have something introduced and suspended next week?
We spoke with the city engineer this morning, and he indicated as long as he was able to say in his application that the legislation will be forthcoming. He's not ever had one rejected while we were reading on the authorizing legislation. But yes, that would be up for June 5th meetings as well.
President Nisley?
Question about finances. So this initial request that's due at the end of May is for Phase 1, $200,000 request, $50,000 from ODOT. Does that mean the 150, the balance from city funds?
It does. And it's
So it says general revenue funds, but, or street funds that we would be.
street
taking
funds, or we could put this out as capital improvement, as we're looking forward to enhance the city. We're looking at, budgeting for 2018, because it's a project that has to be done basically within a year's time, if we're awarded this grant.
And then one other question about what they're calling Phase 1. Am I understanding on the second page, that tentative schedule, where it says, there's one part of it that refers to kind of planning, but it's actually design, construction, and hardware installation all rolled into Phase 1. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Of which the city share would be $150,000.
Right. Phase 2, and who knows, there could be a Phase 3, Phase 4, would be to continue to extend this as we have typically been thinking, correct. Someday, wouldn't it be grand to have a backbone that runs the full length of the bike path? For connectivity, so that we could actually start to connect the water treatment plant with the wastewater treatment plant, with the city building here, starting to think bigger, but that would be Phase 2 as we roll along, and obviously have to think cost, but.
Thank you. I'd like to put forward that this also will establish our presence as a city that does infrastructure development like this. There has been discussion a couple times in the State House of, as in other states, basically making it, taking away home rule of being able to make this sort of infrastructure improvement. So I think that it's important to get the fact that we already have conduit down is important to mention, and that this is, for me, it's like however many years ago, and people are like, well, maybe we should, build roads. Well, everybody's not using horses, we need roads. And everybody's like, well, that's so expensive, but it's a backbone of our infrastructure. And when I've been out in areas, people complain about the fact that we don't have broadband throughout the area, and the rates and speeds are sad sometimes, and we can't see ourselves as being an economic powerhouse in the southeast region if we don't have this. I mean, it's like not having streets or light.
Member Butler?
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Fall and appreciate the forward-thinking ideology here of our Public Works Director and the Executive Branch Administration supporting this forward-thinking process. I think, again, just basically considering the technological advances that will enhance safety, the foremost, as well as commerce and development. I just think it makes sense for us to begin to lay the groundwork now to continue to plan for the future. To me, it's a small investment with a good, positive, big outcome. Thank you.
I had one more question. How does the Economic Development Council come into this if they do? Sort of,
Well, at this point, with this project and this grant, they don't.
right.
No, but, well, let me give council an example, if this is helpful, when I'm thinking economic development, and we're looking at this particular project, if this comes to fruition, which I'm hopeful, and that is that a strategy that's been used in other cities that have city-owned and controlled fiber is to use that as an incentive for business X that believes they're gonna bring, say, 10, 20 jobs to the city of Athens. One of the things you can do, any city could do this, is you can leverage the fiber that you own by giving them a pair of fiber or maybe 2 pair of fiber, but you can strike an agreement to where you have to demonstrate X amount of growth of employees over time, and you use that fiber. That's a Dublin, Ohio model that I'm mentioning. And so there's a lot that can be done, and I'm personally not thinking Athens County EDC, I'm just thinking
Right.
city
But
economic development.
They have looked at broadband, and so bringing them in may help leverage other resources for money. I mean, I would think that they would have come out with this sort of model a while ago, and I just would like to make sure that we're not stepping on toes and seeing whether there's something that they have, that they can bring to the table. Does that make sense?
It does, but I pretty much guarantee you that there's no toes being stepped on with this process. There's a lot of bigger ideas that are floating out there with broadband, that there's conversations that the EDC is involved in, that I'm involved in, that OU's involved in, and OU is all of us keenly interested in what we can do in the future. But this is a city project as we're looking at this. Something else, just to share real quickly about that, since we're talking about, sure there's an economic development component to this, but, we have several city schools, and how interesting would it be to have, high-speed internet that we're able to work with the Athens County, or Athens City School Board to be able to partner and have fiber to our schools. Again, that's just an idea, but it's conversations that I think could be had and should be had if we're successful in doing this.
Thank you.
Member Reisner?
It just dawned on me, if we put in our own fiber, and I'm all for it, I think it's a phenomenal idea. In fact, I'd like to see it go all the way down Richland instead of just stopping at the fire station. I'd like to see it go all the way. But
up to your house.
Exactly. But our connection then to the internet would be through Ornet.
Likely.
Okay, now my question is, if we were to sublease some of our fiber, say, to some local businesses who want to do something for profit, can they then use the Ornet for profit?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to be explored with that.
Right.
I just gave an example.
Exactly.
In terms of economic development, that's all. There's a lot that has to be explored with that, Member Reisner.
Okay. There may be other solutions other than Ornet out there.
There could be.
We need to.
Again, I'll speak to what other municipalities have done. They've got a third party who manages, a database as well as, their level of connectivity.
Well, I've always been in favor of the city as an entity controlling its own communications. And as much as I respect Ohio University, having worked with them and done and educated by them, they still have a hold on us in that sense. So, I don't know, I just like the idea of being more independent. So, if we could explore other avenues, I think it'd be worthwhile. That's it. Sorry.
Member McGee?
Thank you, Member Cochran. I just wanted to express my concern, as always, with the cost of things. And I look at the map, and I'm a little concerned with whether the thought of the economic development, at least in this area, as proposed, is kind of a pipe dream, as opposed to if it were shifted out more on State Street, East State Street, something like West State Street or something. So places where we would have them more open space for real economic development. I see that as a limitation for the proposed growth. I would hope you could address this at some point in time and give us some more concrete instances of what you would propose for how this would spur economic growth prior to an ordinance being passed. Does that help?
I can certainly do that. I can also share this with you, which Ohio Department of Transportation, Fred Vogel was the one who created this for us. And this is basically a 1 mile radius, I believe that's correct, a half a mile radius, 1 mile radius of businesses within the uptown area. And if you look at this rather dark line of spots that's along there, those are all businesses up and down the Richland, or up and down the Court Street corridor. But not saying that all of Court Street is necessarily building-wise is built out. I think there's some opportunity that you can see in some of the existing buildings to where they can, it gives a property owner the ability to start to think maybe differently, that if I can pipe high speed into this building too, that maybe I can do something different with the second through fifth floor or fourth floor or whatever. But you raise a good question and a valid one in terms of if you're thinking actual physical growth where people can grow.
Yeah.
Sure, but I would also contend that there's still growth right here on Court Street and Richland Avenue and others too, as opposed to just open space. I think there's existing structures that we could see some internal development. Let me just say real quick, businesses within the radius that I just mentioned to you, 3,684 businesses, and employees within that same zone is 27,476. Now, granted, a lot of that is probably Ohio University, which gets counted into that mix. But again, it's providing high-speed broadband within that level of employees versus businesses. But we can certainly, as we look at this too, remember McGee, I just mentioned early on, using the West Union improvement area, to the end. Well, let's just say, once if we're successful and we get this and we're working it, that part of phase 2 isn't, well, wouldn't it be great if we punched a conduit and fiber all the way down West Union to 682 in terms of development? And sure, go the other way as well. I mentioned a minute ago, backbone, possibly having a backbone or at least laterals, a spine that runs the full length of the bike path to Holzer Clinic on one end and to, I don't know what, Eclipse, or, well, I guess that's out of the city limits, but as far as you can within the city, or partner throughout the county, get everyone else on board too, and say, let's get that last mile if we can. But again, we're talking big, we're talking expensive too, when you start going down that. I get it.
Okay.
I get it, but
Sure.
isn't that the cost of, improving and advancing yourselves in a lot of ways?
Any other questions? I think one thing that would be helpful is to see a more clear picture of where the funding would actually be coming from, whether it's, the mix of what's capital improvement, what's streets, what's coming from which fund. And we'll work with the clerk on this for next week then, June 5th. Thanks.
We're off next week, aren't we?
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to Finance and Personnel Committee with Councilmember Reisner chairing.
Thank you, Madam President. I got 3 bullet points here. Transient guest tax, staffing and appropriations. And I'm bringing up the topic of transient guest tax. I know that ordinance is not due for a while. We do it every year or so, but I'd like to get the ball rolling to see where we're at, what it will be, how much we're bringing in, and hear from the administration and from the auditor and the Travel Tourist Bureau and all other stakeholders, council included. So who wants to get the ball rolling? Administration?
Well, the numbers I have in front of me, historically, I've got 2015 hotel lodging, 2016, 2017, and the total for 2015 is $406,159. The 5% county fee is $20,000, $20,453.71. Leaving a balance of $386,066.19. From there, I mean, I can go through all these if you want me to, but, in 2016, it increased by what appears to be about $23,000 on the total, and the balance being $408,100.45. And then currently into May, I'm assuming, or?
No, I don't know. I just got year-to-date, I don't know when they ended. And I guess one question I would have is these from, these are the county collections? Are these separate from the amount that?
City has its own.
Okay, so these are the funds that the Visitors Bureau is receiving under less the 5%, so under the current fee. You have an ordinance from 2015. I believe it's
04-15.
Right.
Is that 70 or per? Because this attachment here says something about 35%.
Well,
Yeah,
Um,
never fall.
the contract was for 3 years. And I think that maybe something that we want to discuss with the transient guest tax is there's other people who are out that pot of money, right? That it also pays for the Economic Development Council for part of it. They get a set amount, no matter how well or how bad the transient guest tax makes for that year, they get a set amount. And we may want to look at whether that would be a similar model to go with the Visitors Bureau.
You're
'Cause
saying
they
a
get
percentage model?
They get a percentage, the Visitors Bureau gets a percentage of collected taxes. The EDC gets a set amount.
Fixed dollar amount,
And
that's
whether that whether there's parity.
The ORC does state at least 50%, so I think
Right.
that's the starting point.
Right.
Whereas this, I found
ORC says 50% to whom?
To the Visitors.
to the Convention and Visitors Bureau of
Right,
your
well, since we're
hotel motel
a public
lodging.
meeting and we're on air.
I'm sorry,
I'd
yes.
like to have all that out in the open.
And the ordinance 0119, I think 14 in December 2014, stated that councils authorize the city auditor to deposit 70% of the transient guest tax revenue
Right.
through to December of this year. I got that right.
And
Oh, Madam President?
historically, it used to be a 50-50 split, right? And then in 2012, we went to a 70-30, where Visitors Bureau and Economic Development Council got the 70.
We have pretty much always paid out 35%. And it's 35% to the EDC until it reaches its max. But the fact is, as the Service Safety Director alluded to, we're required by state law to give them 50%. The other 50% is supposed to go into our general fund. The EDC is not part of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. That's our choice to give them that money. The other part of the 50% is we provide the office space on East State Street for the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So the reason, the money that we put into the tourism fund really has nothing to do with, well, it doesn't, the split that we're required to give. We have a tourism fund, and we pay the EDC out of that fund also. That's why it's 70% going in there. It's not all going to the Visitors Bureau or all to the EDC. But we pay both of those obligations out of that fund, and that comes to about 70% of what we take in. And as I said, the ORC not only refers to how much we give the Visitors Bureau, but also we are supposed to put the balance in our general fund. So we might want to make some changes there, pay the EDC out of our general fund. I don't know, this is a contract that we've had, same kind of splits for quite a while. Used to be 50,000 for the EDC, I think, when I was on council, but, or at least early in my auditor days, and, so that's how that is. The split that we put in that fund is just to meet our obligations. It really has nothing to do with what we have to, what the ORC says, or if, yeah. You have any other questions?
Another question?
Yeah.
Member Fall?
Well, since we're talking about this, I would like to point out that we have had increases in the transient guest tax over the last 3 to 4 years, even with some of the economic uncertainty. And I think that the Visitors Bureau has done an outstanding job of doing that development, because those transient guest tax money is directly related to the economic development that the Visitors Bureau goes out and does with the hoteliers and everybody else who does one of our biggest industries in the city, which is tourism. And I think that that's an essential thing to identify as one of our biggest economic drivers in the city. So I just want to say that everybody's getting a bit more money because the work that they've been doing. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Member Paul. Other questions from council? Administration, want to pick up on that, or anything more to say?
Again, I think part of the reason this is coming forward is because the fact that our general fund is so tight. And it'd be interesting to parse through the numbers and determine exactly what, I understand what, the auditor's saying, that ordinance authorized 70% into the tourism fund, but other things are being spent out of that we may want to look at that. And this agreement is through the end of December by ordinance right now, this year.
Can I stop for some clarification?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Paige.
This is just about the most confusing thing that we deal with. So just to kind of recap how we're funded, we receive 95% of the county lodging tax. They have a 3% tax. We receive 35% of the city tax. That's also a 3% tax. So when someone stays in a hotel, they pay the sales tax, but they also pay this additional, within the city limits of Athens, an additional 6% in tax. And just to clarify, our building, we do rent our building from the city. It's $51 a month. But we also pay all the utilities, all the maintenance, all the groundwork, all the gardening, and all of the infrastructure that happens within the building as well, with the exception of our air conditioning and cooling system. So there is an additional probably $10,000 to $15,000 in cost wrapped up in what we do to maintain the building and keep the lights on in there as well. So not all of the cost of that building is absorbed by the city, just the general maintenance on the bigger projects that happen there. And just to clarify, over the course of the last 5 years, we've patched the roof twice, and we've had an antique beam installed downstairs to support the entire infrastructure of the house because it was built in 1846. So occasionally there's some things that do have to take place there. So are there any questions about that? I think in 2016, I think our general take on that 35% was about $140,000. We like the percentage because we're competitive, and we know that when that percentage exists rather than a flat rate, that there's a little bit of risk involved for us, but when we grow, we make more money, and we have more money to invest. So that percentage is hugely important to us. And if there was an opportunity for us to get 50%, I would certainly take it. And there's certainly always more things that we can do, but what we have really enjoyed, and you, if you'd like for me to send you a chart of what our funding has looked like over the course of the last 10 years, I can forward that to you so that you can see the growth that we have enjoyed. And it's a result of the investment that our businesses have made. It was nice at the hoteliers luncheon last week. We heard from 2 of our properties, one who was named one of the top 12 properties of their kind in the U.S., the Fairfield Inn, and also the Ohio University Inn received their customer service award of all of the properties, and there are some very high-end properties that their management company funds. So it's not only are we generating additional income, but we're providing top-notch service too. And so that investment is hugely important to the job that we do in promoting the city and the county. So, any questions? Thanks for letting me talk.
Any further discussion? Oh, Madam President?
I would agree that I think it would be helpful to see a history, and thank you, Paige, for the background information, but I think it would be helpful to see the history, like I have different papers of what our transient guest tax income has been over the years. So we've been, back in 2011, we were at $275,000, but now we're at, $408,000. And that percentage and what then has been given historically to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and then the Economic Development Council. I know we've got that cap, that flat cap on the Economic Development Council, but just to take a look at the 2 of them side by side, because that's our dilemma with the 3%, as I understand. We are still needing to make the configuration of where's the money going to go to those 2 entities out of that pot of money. So.
Just to put it in perspective, after 2 quarters last year, the EDC had their $55,000. And it has increased, and as Paige said, amazingly, we fill up these hotels, we get new ones, we fill them up, and not just for OU events. And so it's a big boon, as Member Fall said, to have the Convention and Visitors Bureau managing what goes on and keeping the hotels full, and that's where we all get money.
Any further discussion on this? So, when can we have the 10-year summary? Okay.
I'll send it to Debbie Walker.
Sounds good. Oh, next on here, we'll move on to staffing. What do you need?
This is a request from our police chief. We have accepted a pending resignation from a police lieutenant. So right now, we've had that 6th lieutenant on the book, as it were. He is requesting that we change the staffing ordinance to reflect back to 20 patrol officers and 5 lieutenants.
From 6 to 5? Is that what you're saying?
Or 19 to 20. That's how I like to view it. Reducing the 6th lieutenant and adding that to the patrol officer.
Right.
So it's keeping the department at the 27 FTEs. So that's not changing. And he's also looking at likely that those numbers 27 won't be obtainable for, a couple of years, a year to 2 years out.
Okay.
But it's just reshuffling the mix in terms of lieutenants and
But
officers.
the city of Athens will still have as many police officers, I'm sorry. Look, I'm 66 years old, I'm stuck in a time where, I lost my train of thought now.
Yes,
What the hell was I talking about?
you're not losing coverage.
You'll be okay.
Councilman Reisner, you're not losing coverage. It's actually affording it at the entry level, which is where we need it. We're still catching up from previous retirements and promotions that have resulted in trying to hire new patrol officers. So anyone out there that wants to be a patrol officer for the city of Athens, there will be an announcement coming soon about the next hiring process. Have to cast a wide net.
There
So
must be
that's,
someone out
this
there.
is the police chief's request. This is how he wants his
Okay,
division to look. Okay, thank you.
so you have something ready for us, June?
For June 5th.
Okay, great. Appropriations?
Again, that's also coming from the police department, wanting to move $30,000 from their TC 100 into TC 200, 300, and this is for unanticipated costs. It's training, polygraphs, they've had to do several polygraphs recent, and then to fund the CPT training. That is they're looking at doing the bias-free policy training, which would include training the trainer with that, so that we would be able to continue to do training in-house as opposed to constantly having to farm out and go get the training elsewhere.
The auditor will have to review this request based on the 100s and the salaries and give the recommendation, but he feels it indeed is there, at least for this year, in order to move it from the salary lines.
Does auditor want to speak to this?
I don't have anything. This is the first I've heard of it.
Okay.
I have nothing to add right now.
Any questions on that? Okay, that's all I have.
Oh, the last one, and I, in my mind, we were going to discuss it this evening, was generator and how to fund that, or maybe that's still in the process of exploration. The generator for the city hall and the law administration building.
I know there's been a lot of discussion, but I haven't seen anything come across to me about it.
I think I initially brought up in city service safety initially.
We talked about a
Two
loan,
options.
or maybe a loan from ourselves, and I don't know if that's been involving bond counsel or.
Right, one option is borrowing from ourselves, and talking with the city treasurer, or again, a conversation that the city auditor and I have had is possibly going through a local institution for a low interest loan. But what's needed, again, at the end of the day, I've mentioned this before, a couple weeks ago, if not last week, is the fact that we've got a serious need for backup generation for this building as well as all of the law building.
Right.
Currently, we have a generator that powers part of the police department, critical elements in the police department, but we don't have any protection whatsoever here in the city building. And as we've experienced with the poles that fell down, not too long ago, all the way back to the day and a half we were without power with the derecho. So
Right.
we've got a quote, as I've mentioned to council before, for a diesel generator at $272,000, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yep, 272 for a single generator that has a step-down transformer that would sit there and do both the law building as well as the city building. The other option, as we discussed, was going the $392,000 route to have two separate gas generators to power both the buildings. But as we've been thinking this through, it's kind of a criticality of the buildings, in terms of looking at the higher cost, but we could, the other thing we could do is put it out to bid as looking at best bid for gas generation versus diesel.
I mean, we took it back to staff again about the diesel versus natural gas. But frankly, they really fell in line with determining that the diesel and the way this would operate would be clean, efficient, and the rare incident, and we have the workaround for any time in terms of getting diesel if a region is out of power. But we just felt they really landed on supporting that as the proposal. So I guess we'll continue to work with the auditor's office to determine a financing way, and then bring that forward to you, requesting it to go out to bid.
Councilmember McGee.
Could I just ask, has there been any exploration of alternate energy sources, either solar or wind generators for this kind of proposal? If you're talking about $275,000, you said, it would seem to me that you could get quite a bit of energy from solar. I would just ask that you consider that as an option.
Where would you mount them?
I'm stumped.
Well, that's a good question for a building that the roof line tends to face, run north-south, as opposed to something like Arts West, which is its roof line, is right in line. It's east-west, and so you've got a nice flat surface to mount a number of solar panels. Yeah, I don't know where we'd mount it. I suppose one thing we could explore is maybe putting solar panels on top of the parking garage. So we can explore that.
I appreciate that.
But at this point, I mean, we're looking at the impact that we've received, especially with our IT in this building, when it comes to power disruption and instantaneously being able to keep things afloat, as opposed to having our servers go down, having to spend the time, and believe me, there's a lot of dollars in time that goes into having to reboot everything. But we'll explore all options to see what's the best path forward, but we need to have generation to this building.
Oh, Member Costas?
Yes, thank you. Has the city ever explored the idea of just buying space on a server and not owning any servers on site? My understanding is something like that is actually a little bit more cost effective than maintaining your own servers. And then that eliminates that need for that kind of backup system, unless there's additional reasons that they're present for that.
I think you heard Councilman Reisner actually speak to that earlier tonight. And I've felt that for at least in the last 4 or 5 years, that council really wanted to own their own infrastructure when it comes to the IT technology. Ohio University at one point had offered to host as a backup server in their building. And I just never really got traction, as it were, more of a level of reluctance see on that. So.
And I can't speak for the auditor, maybe the auditor wants to speak to confidentiality and security of servers for information that her department has, as well as the police department, and being able to, again, make sure that the information that's being processed through that department is properly managed and maintained. But let's see if the auditor wants to speak to that.
Just quickly, we have our own servers for our financial software. There's a lot of confidential information on there. And we also have to be able to connect with our software provider whenever there's an issue. They can remotely go in and manipulate our servers and our computers from where their offices are. And there's just a lot of other things involved with doing that. We've also the state has had their own IT audits the last 3 years. I'm sure Member Reisner realizes this too, the importance, well, everybody does, of managing your electronic information. And it's just a really big deal, and we are looking at more like secondary backup with our servers, and not just trying to move it somewhere else, but having our own backup and then also having it backed up somewhere else, which we are doing. But it's just more complicated than just putting everybody down the street or in the cloud. As we know, the cloud has been hacked before. It's just really, there's no sure bet as far as security. And as a government agency, we're responsible for any confidential information that's leaked out there. All of our tax files, thousands of accounts, every bit of that information is confidential. So even though there's a lot of information we provide that is public, we have people's bank accounts, we have their social security numbers, we have a lot of information that we really need to be careful about. And we might end up on a city server, but like I said, when we have issues and to do our own backup on site, we also have a backup off site, but we have to be able to communicate with our software company then and there sometimes. If there's an outage on the weekend or if it's somewhere else and happens, it's just more complicated for us to get back up and running. So. I talked to our IT director about this kind of stuff, pretty regularly, and so I don't know where we'll end up, but those are just other things to think about.
Other comments? Okay, that's all I have.
Well, we will adjourn at 8:44. p.m. Our next meeting will be on June 5th at 7 p.m., and that will begin with a public hearing for the city considering the gas aggregation, and then we'll go into regular session immediately following that on June 5th. Thank you. Good night.
Howard.